Does anyone have anything else that they'd like to share, or questions on what in the introductions and the MS4 permit reminders? I might need help finding any. Does anyone have their hands raised, Julie? I can't see everybody.
Nope.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing and let somebody else share from there.
All right, thanks, Maria. Nice to see everybody this afternoon. Stephanie is going to do the screen share from our end. Do you want to pull that up, Stephanie? Okay, cool.
Yep. Let me know when you can see it. I'm gonna make it full screen.
You can see it. Thank you.
Great.
Great. Okay. Thanks. So we're gonna hand the presentation back and forth a little bit between our team and the Kleinfelder team. But I am kicking us off, just getting folks up to speed. If you missed the last meeting or it was a while ago and you forgot, don't worry, we're gonna kind of remind you about what this is all about. And especially since, as Maria mentioned, we are involved with a lot of initiatives with some of you, so it can be hard to keep track. Yeah, next slide, Stephanie. So the project team is primarily us and Kleinfelder, and with you guys as our primary stakeholder. And so we already introduced ourselves. Next slide. Okay, so this project is funded by the Mass DEP MS4 Assistance Grant Program. So we thank Mass DEP for their support. This, similar to the MVP program we were just referencing, is a quick turnaround. We pretty much got all our contracting set up in January, and the project ends June 30th, 2021. So we are focused on developing a template and some support materials for you all to produce your phosphorus control plans, or PCPs. So that's generally the purpose of the grant. Next slide. So our objectives are to create a stepwise process to guide municipalities through preparing their PCPs, looking holistically on a programmatic scale. So that's really what the bulk of today's presentation will focus on. Stephanie kind of walking you through the process we've come up with. Just a note that kind of everything is in draft at this point, and really we need your feedback. So if any feedback you have today, things you think about later, this project is designed really just to help you achieve PCP compliance. So we really do need to hear from you. So just to bring everybody up to speed, reminders, summary from our last meeting. I think Heather, you were actually gonna take over here, since Heather was a key player in the stakeholder engagement that we've done so far.
All right, yeah, I can jump in here. Thanks, Julie. So first of all, thank you to all of you who have been providing us with feedback by filling out the survey or answering our follow-up questions. A few of you did one-on-one interviews. It's been incredibly valuable and has really informed the direction of this project. So we really appreciate it, and we hope to get lots more feedback as we move forward. A few of the primary challenges that have been identified so far are just a lack of clarity about what the PCP should look like, what format it should be in, what information it should include. Data gathering and tracking has definitely been identified as one of the biggest challenges for many communities, particularly with respect to structural control measures and tracking BMPs that have been built, particularly over the last 15 years or so and going forward. Also continuing to track maintenance, which we know is really important. There's also some confusion over kind of the order of events that the permit lays out. So for example, under the permit, it seems like you would get partway into your PCP development and implementation before calculating changes in land use and impervious areas since 2005. And some folks had questions around that. So something we've been thinking about and talking with EPA as well to get some more clarity, and we can share that information with you. So more feedback that we got on the PCP itself is that folks are looking for guidance on the process, looking for kind of a flexible and customizable resource that can be adapted to their individual needs of their community, because everyone is kind of approaching this a little bit differently. And then looking for, again, those tools to kind of do the data gathering and tracking process. So something like, an accounting spreadsheet, what are other communities doing in terms of gathering that data and recording it going forward? And we have some recommendations to provide on that as well. So again, our goal for today is to continue gathering that feedback and hearing from all of you about what is useful, what's working in your community, where you need help, where there's room for improvement. So we are going to share some information about the programmatic approach that we've been developing in terms of creating the PCP template and thinking through the different steps that you all will go through as you develop your own PCP. We're going to share some recommended tools that we've identified, and then we will share an overview of the template. It's a preview of what the ultimate template will look like. It's not finalized yet, but it's a great time to get input and feedback from all of you on the direction that we're heading with this project. So with that, I will turn it, we're going to have a poll.
Yes, we're going to pause for a poll. This poll has 3 questions. Okay, you should hopefully all be able to see them right now. And you can go ahead and vote in the poll. So question number 1, do you think you currently have all the necessary tools in place to achieve your PCP reductions? So do you have all the money you need? Do you have all the regulatory tools you need? Pretty open-ended question there as far as, do you have what you need, or will you need to make changes? Number 2, what do you see as the biggest challenge to meeting your PCP requirements? I think we asked you guys this before, but interesting to see if we see any different answers here today. And then number 3, are you hoping to meet your PCP requirements solely on public property? All right, great. So I see responses rolling in now. We got about 60% of the vote in. I know our team has a bunch of folks on the call that won't be voting. Let me give a last call for poll entries. Okay, excellent. Almost 79%. I mean, excuse me, almost 70%. Okay, great. So question number 1, we got 1 yes, that's good. 94% no, you will need to add some elements to your stormwater program. So hopefully this process will help you kind of define really where you might want to grow, or where you might want to grow first. Number 2, biggest challenge is funding. Not terribly surprising, followed by space constraints, and then also some concerns over lack of public support, lack of support from leadership, and technical challenges. And number 3, are you hoping to meet all your requirements solely on public property? A few of you are, 3 yeses, 5 no's, and then mostly don't know yet. Great. All right, I will stop sharing those. Excellent, and I think I'm handing it over to you, Stephanie.
Great, thanks. Betsy, did you want to give a brief intro before I dove in?
Yeah, can you go to the next slide?
Of course.
Sure. So this is really, we are going to be providing some details, and Stephanie's going to be stepping you through, sort of what the elements are of these different approaches. But I wanted to give you just a quick context around what this programmatic approach is all about. is really, we envisioned it sort of in 4 buckets, 4 steps. The first 2 of which are primarily assessment planning related, and the latter 2 are really a little bit more about implementation planning. But you know, it basically came about. You know, if you look at that first step, it's really, you know, planning your trip. Nobody plans a family trip without knowing where they're going, and so this first step really is where is there. And all of you, I think, are familiar with the fact that you'll be choosing your PCP scope geographic area. That's pretty straightforward, maybe a little more nuanced for some, but we'll talk a little bit about that. And then this element that Heather mentioned around, you know, quantifying what has happened between this interim period between 2005 and today. A little bit out of order, you know, per the permit requirement, but really makes sense when you're looking at your ultimate destination. If you're going to be planning to how to get there, you know, you might as well know where there is. The second step we're talking about here, this investigating your PCP toolbox. This again is sort of an assessment phase, taking a step back before you get into the weeds and start feeling, you get some blinders on around what makes sense. The idea here is to look at, you know, what are the strengths that, you know, what are the things that may be low hanging fruit and or early implementation opportunities for you based on what capacity you already have, but also early on in the process, understanding, you know, where you have to do some capacity building, you know, helping recognize that those latter milestones in the years 15 and 20 are going to take some time. So taking the time now to understand that and understanding, you know, what other resources beyond, you know, your DPW you're going to need to make that happen. Then you get into the final couple of stages. We're really talking about, you know, how do we get there? You know, it's beginning to look at the strategic level on how you pair, you know, some of these strategies together. And all of these things we're going to walk through a little bit in greater detail. And the last piece really, sort of the equivalent of the kids in the back seat asking, you know, are we there yet? Are we there yet? You know, it is iterative. You know, getting there is going to take some effort to look at the different ways in which you can accumulate, you know, some of those reductions. So that's really what we're talking about as far as the program approach. And we're going to get into some detail with that. I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie to talk a little bit about some of the tools and products that we're developing.
Awesome. Thanks, Betsy. Before I go to the next slide, I guess this approach that Betsy just outlined, the goal is basically to walk communities through each of these 4 steps to build their kind of PCP approach. So I'm going to walk through each of them with a bunch of flowcharts and talk a little bit about what the deliverables are of how we would actually convey this information to you once we're done with this meeting. So step 1, like Betsy said, is identifying your target, your PCP scope, and understanding your current conditions. So the idea is to try and guide you through using some mapping analysis that we've been putting together and guiding you through answering some questions about comparing those 2 options of your implementing only within the MS4 regulated urbanized area versus your entire jurisdiction within the Charles. So basically walking you through that process in a little bit more detail than the permit does. And then, like Betsy said, trying to jump a little bit ahead and start accounting and say, okay, we know what the 2005 baseline is and we know where we have to get to, but what's happened since 2005? And let's understand that now. And so we've been trying to pull together some tools to simplify accounting since 2005, both for non-structural and structural BMPs, and then walking through those land use changes due to development, due to increasing or decreasing impervious area. So starting to take credit for that stuff now. And basically the end goal of this step is that everyone should have their kind of where they are now and where they have to get to. And then the next step, now that you know where you have to go, is to figure out what tools you have at your disposal and what tools you want to invest in and build. One of the questions that Julie had posed in her poll was whether or not you think you can achieve your PCP targets on just public land with BMPs. And this was something that we spoke with Newt about a little bit when we got his feedback of wanting to think a little bit at the start of the process about more creatively about you probably won't be able to just add a bunch of structural BMPs and be done and walk away and you've achieved your PCP. So the goal of this step is to start kind of doing an inventory of your existing operations. So looking at your staff, the staff training, staff levels, staff quantity, funding, how much money you have, funnels into the funding source assessment, land availability, and start to rank all of these different pieces. And the goal is to basically have you walk through each of these, the organizational tools, the natural and infrastructure, policy and economic stuff, and basically build a toolbox of lots of different things that hopefully are broader in scope than just what types of structural BMPs do I want to implement, and to start thinking about that now. And then once you have those tools, okay, what do we do with them? So if we have, this probably isn't really a case anymore, but if we have like a lot of staff that are looking for things to do, but you don't have a lot of maintenance equipment, maybe a strategy is invest in some equipment to build kind of two pieces that go together, and then having a robust non-structural BMP program, BMP maintenance program is something that might be really intuitive for your community. So the goal is to have you step through this inventory and start to build things that fit really well with what works, or understand where you want to invest to create strategies that will align well with what your community is doing already. And then the last step of this is basically quantifying that. So we have a lot of ideas of strategies, but how many of them and to what degree do we have to implement them in order to actually get to the target? So starting to iteratively calculate what you would estimate the benefits to be for each of them. So if we're going with this non-structural BMP example, if we're going to implement, you decide you want to implement street sweeping bi-monthly on the entire town, let's estimate those benefits and see what % of our PCP target are we getting to? Is it chipping away at 50%, at 10%? And basically continue to refine and add tools and strategies from that quote unquote toolbox until you get to the goal. And essentially at the end of this, you're at the start of your PCP and you have a lot of things you can do. And that's hopefully the goal is to basically funnel that into your implementation planning for the PCP to figure out what goes in phase 1, what goes in phase 2. But the idea is that you've built all of the kind of tools and the ideas of how you're going to get there early on. And some of the things that we're going to walk through in a little more detail is kind of how you do that, how we're going to walk you through this, what tools that we're going to recommend, both things that we're developing and things that already exist, and kind of give you that whole resource library of what to use and when to basically build this approach. So I think I just ran through that really quickly, but I think we're hoping to get just feedback, just get everyone's initial thoughts on that approach strategy. Julie, do you have the?
Yes, let me launch the, well, I'm wondering actually, Stephanie, would you want to take any, maybe pause for questions before we jump into the second poll?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any questions?
Do you want to stop the share for a minute, I guess, just so we can see
For sure.
everybody?
Hey, Stephanie and Betsy, I do have a question if you don't mind.
For sure.
So I guess I was a little confused. I thought what you guys were working on was this like template for the plan. But are you guys going to be compiling those structural BMP, that information, the stuff that's been built since 2005? I guess this is what I want to kind of understand that we're underway. Go ahead.
Yes. So in terms of for each specific community, what Stephanie will be going into in greater detail in this next section here is the actual that content, the report content, what that looks like. So this initial discussion is really about what you're seeing or what you will see in the model template is presented the way that it is, or how you get there. And then this toolbox also of different kinds of tracking and accounting tools to be used by your community. So we are not actually doing. Yeah, we are not doing.
It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And the goal of this approach and the way that these kind of flowcharts will be disseminated is through kind of interactive worksheets, is to try and create stepwise steps to get to a place where you feel like, all right, now I know how to go and actually build the PCP. And then the template, that will feed the template. Hopefully pretty smoothly is the goal. Other questions, reactions? Hearing none.
All right. I'll go ahead and launch the second poll then. Okay, should have popped up for you. The first question, just kind of gauging if this is approach you guys were already thinking about your PCP implementation on a programmatic level. So really kind of that holistic approach. And then second, do you find this holistic approach useful? Third question, do you anticipate compiling this information on your existing resources and gaps will be useful to developing your PCP and enhancing your stormwater program in general? All right, give folks a few more minutes. Not minutes. We will not sit here for minutes. I'll give folks a few more seconds. All right, I think we hit the same target. Oh, we're over our target from last to last poll. Excellent. People are warming to the polls. Okay. All right, hopefully everybody can see the results. So a lot of people are already thinking that way. That's great. Almost 60% of you. So that's great. It seems like most of you find this approach useful. 70%, over 70% yes, like taking a holistic approach. And then it seems like also support, over 76% for this approach to kind of compiling, getting all your information together in one place, using those worksheets as Stephanie described. So great.
Can everyone see my screen again?
Yep.
Great.
You're back on.
Thank you. So the last couple of slides on this kind of approach framework is hopefully addressing that question, Zach, that you had about kind of how this fits into the template. So the way that we're planning to do this is have interactive worksheets, essentially, that guide you through and ask you questions and point towards resources you can use and things to figure out and data to gather to walk you through this in a stepwise approach that comes hopefully with kind of discrete outcomes for each template, each worksheet. So a screenshot on the right here is of one of these worksheets, basically walking through those different tools, and that leaves you space to kind of answer the question and start writing, not that much space, but start writing in what is pertinent and relevant specifically to your municipality. And then the end of some of these worksheets, another example screenshot on the right, again, these are all draft, but to actually report and write out, all right, here's our new baseline, here's our baseline load, here's what's changed since 2005, here's our new reduction requirement, and kind of TurboTax style. Now we have all these numbers that have random values associated with them, and then we'll use that to track it directly into the PCP template itself. So it's kind of going to be like a companion document to work through, hopefully guiding you, pointing you to resources and tools, and then helping you funnel back into the worksheets, into the template itself.
Just a quick comment, Stephanie, for, again, I mean, she mentioned the sort of the TurboTax kind of model for this. For those of you who are familiar with the watershed-based planning tool, it's also, it's not nearly as well funded as some of those items, but the intent is much the same, which is to say that there are some, the report itself is the report, but embedded in that are those links that drive you to the exercises that will give you the information that then becomes the content for that report, and ultimately that which is appended to your SWMP and becomes a part of your program plan. So you know, that's just another sort of analogy there as far as the manner in which this is intended to inform the PCP.
Thank you, Betsy. So now we're going to walk through some of those tools that I keep highlighting but haven't talked too much about yet. So what other things can we use to partner with this information to actually help streamline this process? And I think Julie or Iris, I'll pass it over to one of you guys.
Yes, thanks, Stephanie. So in addition to developing that model PCP that Stephanie just walked us through, which will include you know, the worksheets that walk you through the process, and then a template for you to populate your PCP. We have a final task of the project focused on helping folks get a bit of a step up with implementation. So while Zach, we would have loved to you know, include something like you suggested in this task, you know, where we're really helping you, you know, be able to really kind of help you get on your accounting. These will be a little bit higher level. So the 3 tools coming out of this task are some recommendations for selection, tracking, and locating your plan structural controls. And this is the one I'm going to walk through today. It will look similar to some of you to some of the stuff we talked about yesterday, actually, at our climate, at our watershed modeling meeting. Fund resource assessment, so funding recommendations, and then recommendations for regional collaboration, which of course, you know, we're a fan of. So as I mentioned, this is the main one I'm going to talk about today, but the other information will be forthcoming and are included as project deliverables. Oh, I forgot you were, I was hitting down on my screen. I forgot you were controlling the slide, Stephanie. Okay, so the 2 primary deliverables of this task will be a matrix that will help provide some initial site screening methodology for green stormwater infrastructure. As I said, consistent with some of the Charles River Climate Compact work, regional planning, and work that we've done with the Nature Conservancy. And then we're also going to provide each community with maps. And if you have the capacity, also GIS files that basically takes that methodology referenced in the matrix and turns it into a map. So it identifies opportunity sites in your community. Next slide. Okay, so this is basically the screening method we've used for identifying opportunity sites. As I mentioned, I know some of you did see this yesterday, but essentially what it does is look for degradation indicators using those GIS layers listed there. It looks for some feasibility factors. You know, you'll obviously be nailing those down at the community level when you start doing your PCP. And then it looks for hazard layers. And these are opportunities to maybe integrate some of your climate planning work with your MS4 compliance work. And then we did pull out some excluded areas where generally, I guess either because it's already, you know, it's already forested or pristine, or because there are some other concerns, generally would not be great opportunity sites, at least for your sort of first priority sites for green infrastructure. Next slide. So these are some examples of what we'll provide. And again, you know, we'll provide these definitely as PDFs so you can zoom in, but then also as GIS layers to folks who are interested in them. So the first map overlays your urbanized area with these opportunity sites. The urbanized area versus non-urbanized area, I know is a decision point really only for a small handful of you. But for that small handful, you might want to consider if all your opportunity sites are out of your urbanized area, that might help inform that decision. So that's the first map. The second one identifies larger opportunity parcels. This obviously example is Franklin. So these are large impervious parcels where you might have opportunities through one project to catch a lot of phosphorus. This next slide, I think, shows the third map in the toolkit, which is, again, this restoration opportunities layer, or the green infrastructure implementation opportunities layer, overlaid with environmental justice communities, habitat connectivity, and green space deserts. So these are intended to highlight areas in town where you really may want to add a little extra green space, where it might benefit from, you may see a lot of co-benefit from increasing green infrastructure in these areas. Next slide. And then we will also, include kind of a curated, as well as some new created content library of resources. This list, you can probably tell, for those of you that are familiar with some of these acronyms, is focused on the accounting side of things. So the Opti tool is EPA's planning tool to help sort of at a higher level, a municipal level, figure out where you might be able to add BMPs and about how many you might need, how much reduction can you get on a townwide level. That, which CRWA has done an online training walkthrough for, which I know some of you attended. It is also available on our website. That is a tool that EPA developed. They're actually currently updating it, and I think some of you are serving as stakeholders for that update. This is a tool where you add projects really once they're built or once they're fully designed, and you sort of have all the details about the project. You walk through, it's a spreadsheet-based tool. You walk through inputting the information through the spreadsheet, and then it will spit out the reductions, and it'll catalog them. So it's designed where you can sort of put in all the BMP. For example, you could use it right now, and I believe some of you are, to account for reduction credits from all the BMPs that have been built since 2005, and then add them going forward. Betsy referenced the Mass DEP watershed-based planning tool that does have an MS4 module. So we'll mention that in the toolkit. We haven't talked to anyone who's used it yet. We would be interested to, though, if anyone has used that module and is finding it useful or finding it challenging, whatever your experience is, be interesting to hear. And then we will also be creating a relatively general accounting spreadsheet designed for folks to really use at the outset of the project. And this will be before you know sort of site-specific details of where your structural VMPs are going to go. And we'll just help you answer sort of some basic questions. How many BMPs might you need, something like that. So that'll be a new tool we're generating with this project. All right, and I think it's going back either to Stephanie or Betsy.
Yeah, I can take it from here. So the last kind of piece of this is just showing how all of these pieces integrate together. So I'm going to share a couple screenshots of our working template. So I showed some of the worksheets, and now I'm going to show some of the pieces of the template itself. So this slide you can see is like an excerpt from a Word document of the PCP approach, which is kind of what we've been talking about, or what I was talking about before. And our vision for this template is essentially to have some text that will be instructional and kind of to talk directly to the user and walk through what the intent of each of the sections are, and then also have them directly reference these worksheets and the other tools. So you can see on the left, I have a call out pointing to somewhere where it literally says, this section references worksheet number 1 in Appendix Z. Basically, go fill out worksheet 1 and then come back. So the goal is to have it be a bit of an interactive process. And then when you get to the more kind of quote templatized text for the actual regulatory pieces of, you know, talk about your funding source assessment, talk about your non-structural controls, will have the template text and have it things denoted of where you can customize and where you put in your, you know, the name of your municipality, which scope area you're using, etc. So it's going to be hopefully something that you can interact with and then remove those instructions and fill in your specific details based on the worksheets, based on the directions it's giving you, and then it should basically be a guiding force for the PCP. So that's my walkthrough. And I guess if we can get any feedback or questions now, if there's any more of that, I can stop sharing.
Stephanie, I might just add one thing quickly related to all of this, but a little bit distinct, is the question of updating stormwater bylaws and ordinances to be consistent with Appendix F of the permit. We at CRWA have done some work to develop some template language that could be used in local bylaws and ordinances, as well as regulations. And we did that in coordination with the model stormwater bylaws and regs that have been developed by the Neponset Stormwater Partnership and by the Northern Middlesex Stormwater Collaborative. So there's those two models out there that EPA is recommending, and then we have just basically created some language that can be used to supplement those statewide models with language specific to the Charles River Appendix F requirements. So I'll put the link to those documents in the chat just in case anyone's interested. I just wanted to mention that that might be a useful resource as well.
Thanks, Heather. I think any feedback or comments people have, even just this seems you seem on the right track and this seems useful, or specific comments would definitely be helpful. As I say, this is really designed to support your all's work. You guys can just unmute. I think we're small enough. Jay, looks like you have.
Are we going to get a chance to look at the draft before the June 2021, I guess, deadline, so that we could just actually review it and comment on it before that closes?
Yeah, if people are willing to give detailed comments, I think that would be great.
And my question is, the deliverables will probably be a Word document and Excel spreadsheets. Is that what your deliverables will be?
Yeah, and then those maps, if you're interested in, and or the GIS files.
Thank you.
So Jay, with respect to your question on comments on the draft, we're hoping to pull as much together here as we can, you know, by the end of the month. If we were to provide that to you, would we be able to, could we ask that people get this back to us like within a 5 working day kind of a period? As you all know, this has been, you know, kind of a sprint for us, but we would very definitely welcome, you know, specific feedback, you know, recognizing, of course, that this is not going to fit everybody's needs, but we want to try to meet the most needs that we can. So we'd like to get this out. And if people can get back to us with specific comment, that would be really helpful. I don't know whether we should do that, Maria, if that should be under the, you know, under your auspices and distribution. I guess we can work with, you know, Julie and yourself to decide on what makes the most sense for that distribution.
Yeah, whatever you guys prefer, but I think that seems reasonable if people can earmark that you feel like you'll have a draft by this date. So they can put it, for those that are interested in providing comments, that they know they have a week, because I know you're on a very tight deadline. So when did you say you think you might, by the end of this month, you're thinking?
Sorry, I know. You could feel I was muted. Yeah, I think we're aiming for the first week of June as a point where we realize we need to have a fairly well put together draft for purposes of review at that point. I think after we have a confirmed date, we will get that out to you, Maria.
Sounds good. That seems reasonable. It's understandable. It's an incredibly, these grant cycles are, they give you whiplash, let's just say.
That's for sure.
Okay, I think, I know Zach had a question about some of those resources, and actually, Zach, just so you know, that model bylaw reference that Heather mentioned is also in the meeting minute notes from the Statewide Stormwater Coalition. So they're in that notes, and I linked them, but they're also here now in the chat, it looks like.
Yeah, great, thank you. I wanted to ask if we could chat for a second, everybody. We have a lot of nice resources on the call. Betsy, I don't want to, or CRWA, I don't want to move forward too quickly, but I know we had a little more time scheduled.
I don't know if they're at the end of their presentation. Are you at the end or?
Yeah, we're at the end of our presentation. Yeah, we were just, again, just if folks had more questions or more feedback.
Sorry if you already said this, but what was your deliverable schedule?
So our plan, Catherine, is to try to get essentially a final draft or a draft to this group by the first week of June, with the hope that folks might be able to review that and provide us with some detailed comment. Obviously, it'll give you the opportunity. We threw a lot at you in a short period of time today, so I realize that having the opportunity to review the actual products will give you a little bit better grasp of how this process might work. So the intent would be we'd get something to you the 1st of June. We'd get that back. We'd work together with CRWA to incorporate those that we think are worthwhile, that can help the template, and then we are obligated through the grant schedule to have this submitted back to DEP by the end of June. We did also have a brief conversation with Newt Tedder, to whom we presented this concept and the process as we've described it, and got some good feedback from him. I think in general he is in agreement that this is an approach that folks have to take. I think, as you all probably know, EPA is very interested in ensuring that people are recognizing the scale of the effort ahead of them, and working to try to keep ahead of the interim dates and milestones that are going to start coming pretty quick after this initial planning phase is completed at the end of year 5. So we are getting some input from them as well. Obviously, they're not going to provide a blessing of any sorts, but they have been part of the process and are aware of what we're doing.
So now, Zach, you can, please feel free to chime in what you were going to say.
Yeah, thanks. I just we have a lot of good people, smart people on the call here from the communities. Are you folks feeling like, and maybe this is just a question for you, Heather and Julie, are you guys feeling like your conservation commissions are also addressing regulations and ordinance within wetlands rules to be consistent, or is that lagging? I mean, I don't think we have any regulators on here, so maybe speak freely on that. I mean, are people working on both of those at the same time, you guys, or are you working on mainly the stormwater stuff and then leaving the jurisdictional wetlands piece to later? I just kind of wondered, so it's like a little kind of a poll question.
I can, well, Pete, unless somebody wants to chime in, I can speak about what we're doing in Newton. So in Newton, I worked with our senior environmental planner to do our stormwater updated ordinance. And the planning group was very, very involved. Like they would have liked to get their hands on all of it, you know, very quickly, because we're also doing a major overhaul of the zoning ordinances. It's called zoning reform. So there's quite a lot going on simultaneously. But also, and this might be true for a number of the communities on the call, we're expecting to get our new Charles River flood maps from FEMA sometime, I'm told, in the first quarter or the first half of 2022. And so that will precipitate the need to update our floodplain ordinance, which dovetails into our wetlands ordinance. They're one and the same for us in Newton. So it will probably be a follow along process for us in Newton. But we've definitely been working with our conservation agent, who is our senior environmental planner, and making sure that everything is dovetailing together as precisely as it can be.
Yeah, along those lines, I think that's why we're recommending a holistic approach to this work, because we don't want, one part of the town is doing to be in any way undermining, the work that another part of the town is doing. But I think complicating all of this somewhat is the fact that the stormwater handbook has not been updated yet, which is in progress. But we haven't even seen the draft, so it's going to be a little while. And a large impetus for those updates is to bring it in line with the MS4 permit. But until that happens, I think there's just a lot of uncertainty at the community level in terms of how to implement a lot of these things and how to ensure compliance with the MS4 permit in particular, because they rely so heavily on the stormwater handbook and local code.
And we have had, at least one example comes to mind where Concom reached out to us, basically for advice on, it was a project that was going through review, and they weren't quite sure about kind of their process for documenting the PCP reductions, or what, basically they were a bit, unsure kind of what role they could or should be playing. Which is why the documents I was trying to link to, I'm sorry that the link's not working, but we can circulate the documents themselves. But one of the recommendations we make in those documents is to require project proponents to be submitting those calculations of phosphorus reductions and thinking about how all of that lines up with the MS4 permit requirements, so that as projects are going through the design and approval process, that information is readily available to the cities and towns, and they can be then factoring that into their PCP.
Yeah, it's just all that wetlands code, just simply points at the handbook standards, and they often will have separate requirements or different requirements in wetlands. And I just kind of wondered if people were really getting at that yet, or we're going to try to focus on our stormwater management regs, which jurisdictionally in some communities really are kind of the small part of the community. Lexington comes to mind. Their jurisdictional wetlands are everywhere. And so conservation has most of the projects that are permitted in Lexington go through conservation jurisdiction. And they have separate wetlands rules and regulations that are different than the stormwater standards outside of their jurisdiction. So just the Commonwealth continues to amaze me, and it's so complicated compared to other states where we have one stormwater law, and we can all abide by that. It's just like such a pain. Then it's tricky. So yeah, anyway, I just kind of wondered.
One thing that Newt Tedder from EPA highly recommended to the communities is to use the bylaw ordinance backed up by regulations, so that as things get flushed out with DEP, that you can update your regulations as needed.
Yeah, Maria, that's a good point. And that's kind of where we're headed, I think, in Lexington, is the wetlands bylaw will eventually point at the stormwater regulations or sections of them that are applicable to performance standards. And so then there'll be consistency across those jurisdictions, because right now there isn't. So conservation and planning board and special permits and all will be all pointing at one set of regs. the bylaws will be separate, standalone, but they'll point over at the others. And I'm fiddling around with it now. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it right, but I'm hoping that I can get it. It is a little complicated because not all elements of the stormwater management rules are applicable to conservation wetlands regulations. You know, it's different, the fees and all that stuff. So funky stuff, fun stuff. It's not the things I want to do. I guess I get paid to do them, so that's all right.
Yeah,
This is, I think it's going to be really helpful, Betsy. I appreciate the work you guys are doing. I think some of those maps will be nice to look at too, and give us some ideas for some planning work.
Yeah, we do hope to be able to pull some sort of a resource reference appendix here as well to drive people to certain things. I mean, one of the things to Maria's point about what they're doing, and Heather touched on it, is we are trying to help people understand that there are other organizations within their community, whether it's the planning department or Concom or Board of Health maybe, or even an economic development commission, that are good resources for, you know, potentially pairing your strengths and things like that up. And did happen to duck, you know, one of the things that Newt had mentioned, because this is a big issue for a lot of communities, is this whole issue of certifying privately owned BMPs, you know, to the point as to whether or not they're being maintained. And he did indicate, although I didn't see it there, well, checked earlier today, that they are looking at development of self-certification programs. So for instance, if you were a community that had a lot of public support for stormwater and wanted to institute some sort of a rain barrel giveaway, you might have some means of, you know, one, you can measure how people responded by how many barrels were given away, identifying, you know, those properties, but then also instituting some sort of self-certification process that provides the town with the means to claim the credit associated with that. And, you know, there's a performance curve in attachment F, you know, for that kind of a BMP, but, you know, do you want to engage that kind of a program? So at the community level, you have to determine whether, you know, that is going to be a, you know, a needle changer for you, or if it's just going to become too expensive. You don't have the inspection capability. But the fact that they are trying to pull together something that gives you a sense as to what that self-certification program should look like, I think is going to be a helpful kind of resource as well for communities that are going to rely on those kinds of you know, social interventions as well as others. So we'll try to pull together as much of that as we can. And obviously it's an ever-changing landscape in terms of those kinds of tools available.
Betsy, did you say, I was checking one of the links. By the way, Zach, the links work that Heather put in, you just have to delete the parentheses she put in. So you have the opening parentheses and the closing parentheses. If you delete that, they worked fine for me. Just so you know. Anyway, at least one of them did. I didn't check all of them, but so tip there. And Betsy, were you saying, because I was checking that, that rain barrels will qualify as phosphorus reduction?
Well, if you have disconnected, it's more a matter of saying, if you have disconnected roof, you know, disconnected impervious area, and how you design that program, you know, I shouldn't speak out of turn with some of what's going to be credit worthy. But the point I was trying to make was that there are going to be programs anytime you're relying, as every community is going to have to do, on private property and private owners of any of these structural controls. The issue around certifying how those VMPs are maintained is problematic and is likely to require a fair bit of labor in terms of human resources within your community to undertake, you know, inspections and monitoring of those kinds of programs. So the idea of there being a significant, you know, a statistically significant way of saying we can do enough inspection to determine that this credit should be provided to us. So that's ultimately what we're trying to do, is determine that we ought to be given that, you know, keep that credit on an annual basis for that work, is what I think is really the point of that. And how those programs, or what those programs look like, are going to be very different in different communities.
Okay, you got me excited because you know, we can only go out
I don't want to misspeak on it, but it's you know, there are definitely going to be programs that are going to rely, you know, if you were, for instance, communities that have stormwater utilities that may provide credits on the basis of what individual homeowners do on their properties, is a means of potentially capturing some of that, those credits as well for the small private homeowners. And for communities that are primarily bedroom communities and don't have a lot of commercial or industrial users, that may be a means of actually capturing some of those credits.
Do you think you'll share this template with the EPA when it's in draft form too, to see if they will get some feedback to us?
Yeah, so we did mention to Newt when we presented to him on Tuesday, I think, around this, that we basically wanted to get a little bit of update from you all. We were also incorporating some changes to clean this up a little bit so that when he was looking at it, it was a little bit more straightforward than it was in the form that we had it on Tuesday. So he will see it. He'll get a copy of this just as you will, and he'll provide us his feedback as well.
Yeah, he committed to being kind of an advisor on the project when we went in for the grant. Because yeah, I think without his, you know, review, even if it's not like a formal EPA, you know, endorses this, without his review, that would, I mean, he's sort of the one you need on board for this. So definitely.
Well, that sounds great. Is there any other comments from anybody? Questions? All right, I just wanted to point out then a couple of things that in the agenda. If you need ideas for, you know, stormwater education stuff, I've linked some resources here. Also wanted to highlight sort of a newer one that I wasn't aware of until a couple months ago, that NUIA has like school education information and toolkits for all different age groups, not just related to stormwater, but something to keep in mind. And I also wanted to highlight the next upcoming EPA Soak Up the Rain webinar because it's on phosphorus. So managing phosphorus pollution with stormwater bioretention systems is on June 8th at 10:30 a.m. And there are the details. And also if you have any topics for future meetings, because this grant is coming to a close, so maybe we can meet in August or early September. And if you have topic ideas, shoot me an email. Is there anything else? Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much, Julie, Heather, Betsy, Frederick. Always good to see you.
Yeah, you too, Maria.
And Stephanie and Iris. I thought maybe you were a programmer when I first heard your. I thought it was actually like a program, like Iris, like like ArcGIS. When I first heard your name, I'm like, who's Iris? Iris is doing a lot. So Iris, welcome. It's nice to see your face. And thank you, and have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, Maria.
Yep, thank you. Take care all.